Hello, good afternoon. It's great to be back with you for another Counselor Coffee as we start up our spring season of these informative sit-ins with some of our favorite college admissions people and talking about the many differences that are happening this season or this year or this never-ending void of the pandemic, however you want to phrase it, as we're going forward and thinking about how to guide our young men as they're applying for colleges and thinking about some of the how to navigate this process when if you have a book that is more than a year old, that book is, you know, out of date right now with what the new landscape looks like. So I'm happy. We were talking before the call. We're welcoming back Tom McHugh. He is the Assistant Director of Admissions at Holy Cross. He's our local rep. He has met with our students for years. He knows Catholic Memorial well, and I think he can speak well to what he has learned over the past year, what our students might be experiencing. And also, he was one of the first Counselor Coffee guests. So, if there's, got to get him a mug or something for, taking that another trip out. But Tom, welcome back to virtual Counselor Coffee on virtual Baker Street.
Absolutely. Looking forward to chatting, and hopefully it's informative and, for the parents in attendance, gives you some action items over the course of the next year and just sets you on the right course, no matter if this is your first child that you're thinking about going through this process with, or if you've done it in the past. So just happy to share my thoughts. And, I represent Holy Cross on a regular basis, but hopefully just like a stand-in for college admissions professionals in general today. And, happy to answer any questions that you might have or address any fears or concerns that you're kind of looking forward to this summer and fall.
And I was so excited to have Tom join us because as we were doing our parent survey of what topics would you like us to cover in the spring season, as we're thinking about our juniors, the number one response from our parents was, how do you navigate the virtual world and virtual visits and virtual interviews and everything virtual that we are now dealing with? As we were doing that survey, Holy Cross released something that they were doing a series of webinars, one of them being how to navigate a virtual world. And then, you know what, Tom is here, and we're gonna get it straight from the source. So, Tom, there's some things have changed, some things are very much staying the same. We have different resources now that we're accessing, but as we're speaking to a room of mostly junior parents right now, what do you see as when we think about now and everything that we have in front of us? How would a junior or a junior parent start the college process, or maybe wade deeper into the college process as we're still kind of early in this spring moment of junior year?
Yeah, I think with any type of research that you're doing, starting very broad is the way to go. And really just having that initial, if it hasn't happened already, kind of that initial sit down conversation with your son and just getting a sense of where his head's at. Like, what is it ultimately that he's seeking, and kind of coming to that mutual understanding of what's the goal here, and what's reasonable for your family. So I think it really just starts with sitting down and having a face-to-face chat, and hopefully there's some room and some space for that this year, and kind of laying some ground rules together. I often advise families to, if you don't want this to just completely dominate the next 12 months for you, to maybe set aside some time each week where you can hash it out and talk about updates, but it doesn't have to be what you're talking about every night at the dinner table or in the car, or as you're going from place to place. So I think, just making a list and figuring out what makes the most sense for you and your family and your situation is kind of an important first step. And then obviously, I don't think this is anything groundbreaking, but just getting a sense of some of those big details, which might end up being kind of gray for a while, but determining location of colleges and universities that you're willing to look at is an important first step. And size of schools and types of majors. It is a little bit of a process of elimination, that there's over 2,000 colleges and universities, four-year colleges and universities in the United States. And there's so many great ones, but ultimately, realistically, there's only one that your son is going to end up at. So just kind of getting this list to a comfortable space, And then I do think, I know one of the, topics that we are going to cover here is just virtual visits and things of that nature. I do think one of the advantages uh, of our current situation is that colleges have really been forced to start for some and for others bulk up their virtual offerings. And that makes it a whole lot easier if, California schools are on your list, not having to necessarily buy a plane ticket and spend a week out there if that feels like cost prohibitive. And you can safely say that you get a good feel of the school, or at least a preview from virtual tours and information sessions to say, this is a school that I really do think I'll keep on my list and apply to, and maybe check out this time next year when acceptances are coming in. Um, I think to answer your question as succinctly as possible, I think the first step just needs to be that initial conversation, and we all learn and organize our thoughts differently, but having some type of system where, whether it's, I'm sorry if there's a dog interruption here, having
The
some,
year for it.
it's true. We all get to see how each other
Yeah.
live. It doesn't have to be so formal. But whether it's a Google Doc or an Excel sheet or just, old fashioned pen and paper, kind of keeping these pros and cons list as time is going by and understanding that where you're at today is not where you're going to be at a year from now, because your son will change and the world will change. But kind of keeping some type of track of your thought process throughout, and kind of narrowing down that funnel to where you get to a comfortable size list.
And I love spring of junior year because the funnel is as wide as it's possibly going to be,
Mhm.
right? That it is completely, uh, we've got a blank slate. You can just start putting things up there. And then, like you said, through that process of elimination, we start to build that list, but it's wide open right now, which is exhilarating for me as as a high school counselor, and probably exhilarating for you as you're starting to meet with young people.
Sure.
But it can also be really overwhelming as a student. And when you're thinking of this starting place, um, with all of the resources out there, maybe even before getting to those resources, what are, to start that conversation, where should a student or a family go to kind of start building that circle to move everything forward?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a delicate question, I think, because the the profession that you and I work in, Jack,
Yep.
is everyone has an opinion on it. Everyone you talk to,
Yep.
um, feels as though they, have some information about the college search process, especially those that have sent children off to school before.
Mhm.
And neither of us can say, we're experts on anything either. We're professionals in the industry and we have advice to offer, but I would just be careful about letting everyone bend your ear and kind of cloud your thoughts, because ultimately the smaller the circle you can keep, the less stressful it will be. If you kind of get caught up in a bumper sticker culture and really focusing so much on just brand names and outcomes, and focusing so much on prestige, I think what gets lost is how fun this process really can be, and how you get to kind of learn about your son on a deeper level and figure out what path his life is going to take from here. So I would say, I know Jack and your office at CM, you guys will have some really in-depth meetings with the students on your caseload, to hash out all of these details. This is giving extra work for myself, but I really do feel like it is beneficial at some point this summer or this fall, for the schools that your son's going to apply to make some points of contact in offices, to say, how is it that I can get to know you and you can get to know me over the course of the next year? Like, every college wants certain things of students, and many colleges do things differently, but just getting a sense of, tell me what I can do. Whether that's just check in with you every once in a while, whether that's an interview, just to kind of get a sense of what your marching orders should be, and how you can, uh, you know, best acquiesce to what it is that the colleges want. So I would say, kind of keeping it to individuals like Jack and I, and not necessarily expanding it out where it has to be something where aunts, uncles, friends, and everyone else has to necessarily be a part of this, because ultimately it is your son's college search, and it's for him to kind of decide, and for you and your family to decide where the next 4 years will be at.
I always like to talk about Uncle Morty at the family barbecue, right? Like, hey, here's someone who comes in and you don't know what the whole details are, but they talk about this application and oh, so and so has these many acceptances, or this is the merit money they got, and oh my, and it can be a real moment of, like, as a parent, a moment of kind of like, oh my gosh, what am I not doing, and coming in from
Hmm.
that place of almost like deficit thinking of there must be something I'm missing here that I need to make up. And like really, one of the things that I like about having, virtual coffees like this, although I would love to have it in person, is Tom is a person. Holy Cross is a school that we like is it's Holy Cross and it's up on a hill and it's beautiful, and this academic institution where they make all sorts of decisions in towers, but like it's just Tom. Like that's where it goes, and having those conversations where you it's a decision that is not necessarily about an acceptance or admission, but it's about your long-term success as a person for the student. And as a parent, you want that connection, so you know that your son is going to a place where people are going to look out for him. And as we start to like build that circle of information, then we get to really what this conversation is a little bit about, or kind of the focus or title at least. Um, so I've had the conversation with my counselor. I've sat down with my parents. I'm starting to build up my list a little bit. I'm I'm like ready to go. I'm ready to hit the ground running. And the reality is, it is difficult to get on campus right now. It is also a benefit is like there are lots of virtual visits, so you could check things out, whether, like you said, they're in California or they're right down the street. So as you, as someone is in that like beginning research stage, when you think about those virtual visits, what are the pros and cons? How do we know when to schedule an in-person visit and kind of accelerate a little bit? Like when you think of all the resources that are out there right now, how do you weight those resources and how someone can access
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the nice things about virtual college visits and even webinars or panels like this is that they're so low stakes. If you're gonna make a drive all the way out to Worcester, you're spending an hour and a half getting out there, and you have another chug back home. You really kind of are stuck there in some ways. Like, you've made the commitment, and there. I remember in my own college search, and I've heard it many times. Like, there are those times where you step on a college campus, and pretty quickly you realize, this isn't the school for me, and and that's great, and that's okay, because like I said, some of this is process of elimination. But if someone were to log off right now, like, it's easy to do, and with when it comes to college visits in general, if you're on a tour and it just isn't sitting right with you, and you feel like you've given it enough of a chance, um, you've sacrificed 5 or so minutes. But I do think for us in our profession, college and universities are so um, upfront and in your face about the fact that diversity, access, equity, and inclusion are real priorities of every institution. And I do the pandemic has obviously exacerbated and brought to light, and someone drops out right there we go. um, so
You're like, only 5 minutes. I've been here 15. I'm out.
yeah, right. um, the pandemic has certainly exacerbated a lot of the inequities in our society. But just in the small vacuum of college admissions, I think it really has challenged us to not just visit the CMs of the world each year, but to really provide access and be open and available to all different schools and districts and places all over the country and the world. So um, you know it's just important to us to provide that access, and for families, hopefully it does just give you the chance to dip your toe in the water now, like early and often, to get that sense of whether this is a place to put on your list for a college visit. um, I also do think when I look at our own virtual tour, there are places on our virtual tour that students get to highlight and show off that, because of time constraints, wouldn't show up on a normal campus tour. So there's kind of these sneak peeks and added advantages as well. Certainly getting to do it from the comfort of your home. Safety and health is something that we take seriously. And while it's really difficult for us right now to not welcome juniors and their families to campus, it just, our priority right now has to be the current students and our community on campus. So we're really hoping that we're able to offer some semblance of an on-campus tour in the summer for your families. But I think for right now, virtual visits are accessible and easy to sign up for, and can give you kind of those nuggets of information that want you coming back for more, keep you wanting to come back for more. So there's nothing like that feeling and vibe that you get when you step on a college campus. But I do think virtual visits have filled some of that void and will hopefully carry you through into the summer and fall.
And I'm going to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, because it's one of my favorite pieces of advice for navigating this process, which is, as a family, kind of have that family conversation of how do we want to do this together, right? Is it going to be Wednesday nights, you don't have practice, you come home, and we're going to spend an hour doing college research together, or I could share some of my ideas and you could share what's going on with you. Have that conversation as a parent of how are we going to talk about the financial aspect of college with son. Have that conversation of how are we going to do research together so that I'm not doing all the research for you, but kind of having those shared moments. And it is, if you're doing 1 hour a week where it's Sunday morning, we just got home, we picked up Dunkin' Donuts on the way home, we're sitting around, it's late morning, and that's the hour that we're going to do some college stuff. Maybe you're doing one virtual visit in that time where it's just, I'm going to log on, I'm going to check out this one school that we've talked about this week, I'm going to see if I want more. I would not, and Tom, I hope you'll back me up on this, I would not advocate for doing 2 or 3 or 4 in a row, because as we've all learned over the past year, Zoom burnout's a thing, and there is no way that I think the 4th school on your list is going to look as good as the 1st school for those virtual visits. And, so if someone's saying, okay, like today's the day, it's Sunday morning, this is the day that I do my college stuff, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do my virtual visit or my virtual event. When you build those virtual events, Tom, like what do you, maybe like take us on the other side, like what do you hope a student sees? What are you trying, other than people playing Frisbee on the quad, right? Like what are the things that you're saying, we want to show off our college experience, that this is unique to Holy Cross, that whether someone's looking at Holy Cross or another school, they say, that's the unique marker, that's not just another Frisbee on the quad moment.
Yeah, I think even before March of last year and our real need for virtual visits, what we've heard time and time again, and what we learn and relearn year after year, is that admission counselors like myself have some information and insight to provide, but what prospective students, from our perspective, really crave is just getting a sense of the lived experience and anecdotes of current students. So I oversee our tour guide program, and this year it's been our virtual tour guide program. And really my job is to, put forth a diversity of perspective and allow those students to share their stories, whether that's their Holy Cross application story or experience in their major, the clubs and organizations that they belong to. But that has always been our strong suit. And I think a lot of colleges feel the same, that the student volunteers and student workers who spend their time in the admission office, they can make or break the process for students, because it allows CM boys to say, I could see myself there. I feel like I would be friends with whoever it is speaking to me. So visual aids are nice, whether that's during an info session or a tour. And I do think our campus is captivating, like many college campuses are. But I always tell the tour guides that I supervise, families are not going to walk away. And if you ask them a week from now or a day from now, like one tidbit of information that you provided, I would be hard pressed to find families that remember facts and figures, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. So that's ultimately kind of the goal, I think, of college visits, is to provide an authentic look into the lives of current students, and then to allow families and the students themselves to figure out, is that a place that I could see myself? And it's obviously it's, kind of like looking through a peephole. Like you're not getting a full vision necessarily. Um, it's just a glance into the life, but you can, in that hour or so that you're looking into a college, either on campus or virtually, you kind of do get that sense of, this is a place that I would thrive and succeed, or for whatever reason, I just don't feel as though the same values that I hold and what's important to me is offered here.
I think that's great advice. And if I could, because there's all, so that's what the college is providing in saying, okay, like we want to have this virtual experience or real, or not real, like, in-person experience. Um, we want to have like, these are your takeaways and this is who we are and this is the character of our students and the character of our university. Let's flip that a little bit, because if someone is a 16 or 17-year-old student, they're a junior in high school, we've been in Zoom for a long time, but it's still just really tough to make that connection. And
Mm.
if you're thinking about kind of the inverse of when you sit down with a student in a virtual interview or they're joining a virtual presentation, like how could that student kind of show who they are in those moments? What advice might you give for someone sitting in to say, this is the way that you could approach it to get the most out of it as well?
I think about that often. I really do try to put myself in the shoes of students, because if you don't, I don't think we're doing our jobs correctly. If we're not thinking about our audience, then we're just, yelling into the void. So, and I think this is a challenge that high school teachers are facing as well. It's like, how do you engage your audience? How do you make students feel included and eager to participate? And how do you keep morale as high as possible in the midst of everything that we're all dealing with? But um, I, we really want students. We are eager for interaction with human beings, just like everyone else is. So, I mean, students turning their cameras on in info sessions, it's something that we appreciate. Like it makes us feel as though we're actually, there's some semblance of normalcy, like we're actually, speaking to students, and we want your questions. We want to provide advice. That, we certainly got into this industry to be counselors to students through this process, and to help them find their fit. So we all understand, like, this isn't where we want to be. We would rather be spending our time in person. Um, but I would definitely encourage the parents here, to look into, as you're making your lists. One of the things to keep track of is just what schools offer interviews, whether they're required or allowed or not available. I think that is such a great way. It's my favorite part of my job by far, is those individualized conversations with students. Every student has a story to tell, and it really just like brings the process to life for me. If we didn't have interviews, I don't know if I would like my job quite as much. But um, it's a really special way, I think, for representatives of a college like myself to truly like sit down and get to know a student for 30, 45, 60 minutes, however long the conversation takes. And I think it's a wonderful personalized part of the process. So it's not something that has to happen right now. We don't start our interviews until the summer, but something to strongly consider. And even if we do have to forge ahead in this virtual world and our interviews continue to be on Zoom, which I know they will for a period of time, um, I think it really does allow you to have that human connection that some of these larger sessions might not allow you to have. But encourage your sons to bring their questions, to ask questions, and to put themselves outside of their comfort zone too. I know when I interviewed at Holy Cross, I was ill prepared and shaking in my boots, and I can't imagine I was the best version of myself per se, but like I'm still glad that I went through that process. I think it stretched me and um, made me feel like they were taking me seriously, and that I wasn't simply just like, a letter of recommendation and a transcript being sent along, but that I actually had some agency in the process and um, got to tell my story. It was meaningful to me.
And let me just say to your point about screaming into the void, right? Is if if anyone on this call has not had the privilege of doing a Zoom presentation that ends with any questions, let me just tell you that each second feels like an eternity. So there is no bad question that a student has ever asked in one of those rooms, because it was like, oh, thank goodness gracious, somebody is talking to me and I can answer and have some direct contact here. So
They're really out there. They're really listening.
it is it absolutely yes. Someone has heard me. So it is definitely, maybe it's preparing a question beforehand. Maybe it's going in and just saying, I'm going to listen for one thing and ask a question about that. But questions are always, always, always appreciated in the current world that we live in. And other than just asking a question, Tom, because of everything that has gone on this year, and I mean, this was kind of the theme of our junior parent night, but those normal markers or extracurricular activities that someone might build have been changed, for lack of a better word. As you think about the next, 8 months or so until mid-November, what are some things that maybe our current juniors could do or you would advise doing that might strengthen their application or just give them a little bit more confidence going into the process?
Am I kind of on the heels of that presentation that one of my colleagues gave about getting the most out of in-person and virtual visits? One of my colleagues gave a presentation on, what juniors can do right now, over the course of the next 8 months, like you said, to be better applicants to colleges. And he's been around the block for a while and has some pretty sage advice. But I just appreciate his perspective. Drew Carter, he was just saying, the past is the past. There's no changing, what you've done so far in high school, but you do have a lot of control of what happens over the next number of weeks and months. And really thinking now about like what teachers are going to write your letters of recommendation, and thinking about what it is that you hope that they write about you, and then bringing that into the classroom right now. Like, maybe you're going to have teachers from your junior year who are ultimately, writing your letters to college. So the work that you're putting in right now is the material that you're ultimately going to be giving them for those letters of rec. So I think that's one action item. And then certainly having thoughtful conversations with your counselor, like Jack, to just figure out, a thoughtful course selection for your senior year. I think that's certainly a major action item. Listening to the advice of counselors and figuring out where your son belongs, but taking on that appropriate rigor that feels like you're challenging yourself, and you're gonna be putting your best foot forward next year, but are at that right level where it's not going to be overwhelming. Starting the college essay early and often, and similar to the college search process, I think too many cooks in the kitchen can be detrimental to a college essay. But encouraging your son to to think about what it is that he wants to write about, how he wants to be conveyed or portrayed, and then getting pen to paper at some point this summer. And I really do try to take the positives out of most things in life in this process. And if your son enjoys writing his essay, we'll enjoy reading it. So I think if you can try to keep that in sight, that all of this should be enjoyable and positive, and that there's no guidebook that can tell your son how to be authentic to himself. I think that that's super important, is maintaining integrity and sense of self from start to finish here. And I think the job of the parents is to kind of help that process to take shape and to guide and direct, and reel in when necessary, but really just to be there to support the student and back them up as they're going through what's a big year in their life. Like these next 12 months are important and very talked about, but like it can be enjoyable. It doesn't have to be so stressful.
And it's okay that your son isn't going on a service trip to somewhere halfway across the globe this year. It's, what, we're going to be where we are. Our feet are here. We're going to do everything that we can in the moment. Some of the most beautiful essays that I read from this cycle were about people spending more time with family and small things, and kind of the new perspective that came with this moment. And the moment is the moment. Like, we don't need to change it because again, we read a guidebook from 3 years ago that says load up on this, that, and this. It might be a summer where it's just nice to go to a restaurant, or it's just nice to do something that's a little bit of a change from what the last few months have been like. So, as we're kind of winding up the planned portion of this conversation, Tom, maybe just as we think about everything that we've learned over the last year and your work with families, what are some of the pieces of advice that you would give now that helps a family kind of survive and thrive in this moment, as we say, okay, these are all the resources. Last year was like, we have all these resources and they're here right now because everyone's adjusting immediately. Now we've kind of adjusted, we've put some things out there, we've seen what worked and what hasn't. Like, your advice overall just for families and students as we enter this year upward, 8 months, 9 months until November.
I may have outsmarted myself here because I feel like my advice was scattered throughout. But I will say, I think ultimately colleges and universities are, they have these mission statements that they put out into the world, which I think are telling and important. So, not to get too, pie in the sky, but I honestly think that's kind of a good place to look if you are just trying to get a sense of like, what an institution really values and what's important to them, and kind of sticking to that value set, whatever it is that is important to your son and kind of who he wants to be surrounded by, and reading through those mission statements, this is the document that's sent along by colleges to kind of let families know what it is that they're signing up for. So one small piece of advice, but I think to echo what I said earlier, just keeping it within the family, being honest with each other and touching base early and often, but not making it completely, the only topic of conversation. And then to trust those like Jack and myself, both the college counseling staffs and the admission staffs, to know that this ultimately isn't like college admissions isn't a referendum on your life and your worth and your value, and that there's so much that is in the control of colleges and universities that is out of the control of families. Like, it is one of those things that you can control the grades that you get moving forward, I suppose, and the essay that you write and the interests that you show to colleges, but every institution has different sets of priorities and what's important to them. So, whatever your son's decisions end up being, it is by no means a reflection of their character or all of their hard work. You can do all the right things and not get the decision that you quote unquote deserve. So just, I guess, kind of trusting that it does ultimately work out how it's supposed to, and that no matter where your son ultimately ends up at the end of the road, like he's more than capable of having a wonderful 4 years and a transformative experience and meeting lifelong friends, and that there are good and great fits, and not getting so locked in on one specific school per se, but knowing that there's a lot of great schools out there too. So hopefully that's kind of an okay period or exclamation point on our planned part of the process, and definitely happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Well, and I appreciate a question coming through in the chat so that we don't have to have the moment that we just talked about of any questions and then Tom and I stare at each other. So thank you. Tom, when you're, as a school that does early decision, right, when you think about what are some of those benefits to going ED and having that things like that, and then also ED is, as we think about those benefits, it's also a very scary decision, maybe I want to say, for families. How can someone prepare themselves to make that move if they feel that it's right for them?
Yeah, this is, one of those conversations that does have to happen as a family unit. It's not a decision that anyone else can make for you. And for whatever this is worth, like, when I applied to college, early decision was not a conversation at all. Like, for most families, having the ability to like see what offers come back and then to compare merit packages and financial aid packages against each other is vital. Like, my family wasn't in a position where we could just say, um, you know, wherever you get in, you're good to go. We really needed to be thoughtful, and with siblings coming behind me, we wanted to make sure that they got to go where they wanted to go as well. So, um, as a representative of Holy Cross, I think the school wants students to apply early decision because that is, it's locking students in and saying, this is my number one choice. If I get in, I'm going. But just as a person of the world and an admission professional, I think it is not for everyone. So don't feel as though if your son's close friends are all applying early decision that you're somehow behind the 8 ball or getting left behind. Everyone's going to end up in the same boat eventually. There's no like golden ticket to getting in early. It doesn't offer you any additional perks or benefits per se. But just from a advantage/disadvantage standpoint, admission rates in early decision at Holy Cross and at a lot of other institutions is going to be higher than it is in regular decision because students, these are the first applications that we're seeing each year. In regular decision, we have to take into consideration the conversation of yields. So, has a student indicated through their actions that they're interested in us and that we think that they have a decent chance of actually enrolling at Holy Cross? And then, there's financial aspects there. There's also athletic recruitment. So there's a lot that ultimately gets kind of baked into early decision. But because regular decision happens later and has more applications and all of the factors which I just mentioned, early decision does have a higher admission rate. So if all things are equal and your family feels as though that is a decision that they can make and your son really and truly falls in love with the college and feels as though, based on all the research that they've done, that this is really where they see themselves and where they want to be, then it can give you, a statistical advantage to gaining acceptance. But that is a lot to leave on the table too, because once you're admitted to an early decision school, you're required to withdraw your applications to all other institutions. And just as a word of caution and warning, there's been a lot of research done that early decision students are ultimately more likely to transfer out of colleges and universities than regular decision students are. Not like in a huge way, but I think it's just a testament to the fact that who you are in the fall of your senior year is different than who you're going to be on May 1st of your senior year. So I don't know, in some ways it's like getting married super early or something like that. It's like, you're signing up for something long-term that you're going to change over time and your priorities are going to change too. So I think it's
just a quick question.
Yeah.
But from a financial standpoint, are you not promised money with an early decision? I guess that's the like kind of down part of that is you're committed to that school and they're not committing to any money.
Yeah, so I'll just speak for Holy Cross in this regard, but we do have some merit aid and we are a school that meets 100% of demonstrated financial need for families. So one piece of advice that I'll offer is, as you're looking at colleges, to visit the financial aid section of their website and to use the net price calculator tools. So there's 2 calculators on our website that allow you to enter your family's tax information from 2 years back and just to get a sense of, will I qualify for any financial aid? You can, talk to admission officers about merit scholarships, but yeah, that's a huge risk, is that if financial aid is going to be important to you and your family, and that's like a major part of the process, by applying early decision, you are signing a document with the counseling staff at Catholic Memorial to say, if I'm accepted, I will be attending here, irregardless of my financial aid package. Just to play devil's advocate, it's not a legal document. There's no ramifications. Colleges aren't going to chase families around, but it is kind of like, a handshake agreement and it's more about the relationship between Holy Cross and Catholic Memorial more than anything, to say, we've really been thoughtful about this. We've done our research. This is a right fit academically, socially, spiritually, and financially more than anything, and we're taking this seriously. But yeah, when that package comes back, if you don't like it, you're kind of locked into it. So that is why it's a huge decision to make.
And if I could build on that a little bit, kind of just broadening it out. Tom mentioned the net price calculators, that is a tool that as a family, you are just going to become very familiar with. It is probably also going to be a very frustrating tool because you have to input your information into each school's website that it doesn't carry over from school to school. So there's that. You can't do kind of like an apples to apples. But one of the themes that is going to emerge consistently over the next 8 months or beyond, if we're thinking about a January application, is Tom and the admission staff at Holy Cross or any other place is not going to build a net price calculator with some of the information that they have, give you that number, or even having a conversation with an admissions rep or a financial aid rep before you make that decision. It's not, it is a big decision because of the work that you put into on the front end. So it's the research, it's talking to the admissions rep, it's talking to the counselor, talking to a financial aid office, so that you have a decent idea of what that merit package, or maybe not merit, but at least your need package would be before you go through that process. So that it is not applying ED does not mean that you are paying full tuition because we have a binding agreement. If you've done that research on the front end, working with your son's counselor, the goal is that you'll kind of know what is going to happen before it gets there. So, and to Tom's point before about transfer rates with ED admissions, that again, like as we said before, ED helps you get into a school. So sometimes if you were looking at it as what's my best way to get in, yes, ED is the pathway for that. That is, if you have not done the work to say, like, what is a place that is a match for me as a whole person, that could be a very challenging decision. So I hope that's a big question, and I'm happy you asked it, and I hope that we covered it in enough detail from a couple different sides.
Just to add one detail, Jack, I'll just say, like, if we get an early decision application when a student has yet to contact the admission office or the financial aid office, we'll reach out to that student and just say, are you
are you sure?
Yeah, did you mean to apply early decision? Because
right.
I think if we were to get an application from CM in the early decision process, we would know, that you guys, we have a full sense of each other. But there are some times where it's like, I'm not sure if we're on the same page here, and a student didn't know what it was exactly that they were signing up for. So we avoid those situations, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and like, there have also been times where a counselor, and I'm not saying Tom would probably do this if it happened, but the student has not participated in any events. We've never seen them on campus. They just applied ED. Sometimes there's a call to the counselor that's like, is this guy for real? Like, does he know what he's just doing here? And like, he didn't click the wrong box, right? So, sometimes the wrong box gets clicked. Like, that's a thing that happens, but we can, those are November problems. We won't worry about those today. We had another, and Tom, you talked about how much you loved interviews. So of course we have a question about interviews, which I think is great to speak to. What is a good time to interview, right? In terms of preparation, we do interview prep in our counseling office. So you can always sit down with your high school counselor. But like, how would they schedule it? How important is that as you're going through and thinking about committee? Because Holy Cross does interviews differently than other schools might.
For sure. This is a question that I get from students fairly often, is like, when is the ideal time to interview? And we offer admission interviews just for seniors in high school. So that includes rising seniors the summer before their senior year, all the way through mid-December. May 1st to December 15th is relatively typical for us, and you can just kind of go onto the website and sign up. I will say the interviews on May 1st, those students are typically like eager beavers, and that's wonderful. But sometimes I think, maybe could have used a little bit more like time to think about what they wanted to say, or a little bit more information about what they were getting themselves into. So I think May 1st might not be the ideal time, but I also know that September, October, November of your senior year, while we're offering interviews then, can just be a very, very busy time for families and students, and there's just a lot going on. So if I had to, pick a month, I feel like July or August, kind of the doldrums of summer, are a great time to interview. Because this is also, while it ends up being part of your application, I think it's part of the search process as well. There's a handful of students each year who will interview with us and then not end up applying for whatever reason. And I think it allows them to learn more about if it's a fit. Most students who do interview end up applying, and 99% of interviews for us are very positive factors. The time and bravery that it takes for a student to sign up and participate, and then the content that we pull from there too, just as we're getting to learn about them and talk to them. So I would recommend kind of researching interviews this summer, doing some prep, with the CM counseling office when it's available. For in-person interviews, it's not as though resumes are required, but I think it is sometimes nice to put your thoughts down on paper and kind of organize your life into some bullet points. And it's nice to have something to pass along as well, or to email along after an interview if it's virtual. But it really is not, interviews are not going to be tricky. It's really just a chance to chat with an admission representative and for us to learn about your life and high school experience all in all. So it's, you're not going to be asked any questions that aren't about yourself or, that you already know the answer to.
I'm going to put this out there, like, have a book that if someone says, what's your favorite book? And you say, I haven't read a book in the last 9 months, like, that's no good. Like, make sure that you're reading a book. And I also tell students, have a kind of, before, maybe you could find a set of 20 common college interview questions, right? If you're doing a July or an August interview, and just doing some flashcards. But I also like to say to a student, come up with 2 or 3 things that you absolutely want to cover, right? That maybe it's not going to make it into your college essay, or maybe it's not something that you really get to fully put onto the Common App. But I know that I really want to talk about my experience, with my grandmother, or at my first job, or being the backup goalie on the soccer team and watching 90% of the entire season from the sidelines, right? Like, whatever those like 2 or 3 experiences are. So you kind of have those front of mind where you're looking for an opportunity to talk about them during those interview questions, not to completely derail the entire interview, but you don't want it to just be a completely passive, what's the right answer? Somebody asks me something, I have to, say a linear thing, especially with boys. Sometimes you want to get them talking a little bit. So, coming up with a couple things that, all right, we're going to go through the questions, but what do we want to make sure you talk about so that if you do get to that last question, is there anything we haven't covered? It's like, oh, wait a second, I want to talk about the fact that I'm an aspiring DJ or whatever else it might be. Tom, we got another question as we're talking about virtual visits. Everyone's looking ahead. Do you have any idea about on-campus tours for current juniors in the class of 22?
It's certainly a big topic of conversation right now. I will say our current focus is on dog again. Our current focus is on, the students we're about to admit, and our plan is to have them sign up for one-on-one individualized tours during the month of April. So that's kind of what we're in the planning stages of right now. But our hope is to be able to, in some capacity, welcome juniors and the rising seniors to campus this summer, and really let's hope for the fall. I just saw an article in the Globe how schools in Boston are really planning for 100% on-campus operations, and if they're doing it in Boston, I think we can do it in Worcester. But there's some that's out of our control, but we're certainly planning to welcome families to campus at some point. Hopefully like July or August is kind of the thought right now. So stay tuned. Watch out.
A good way to stay tuned, right? Like, add a school to your following list and score. Like, get on a school's mailing list. If they're going to open up, they're going to blast out that message to their, the interested students everyone wants to open up. So once they're open, they're going to say, hey, we're open. You don't want to have to keep on checking back and like, oh, maybe today,
Sure.
maybe today. And that goes to the very last question in our chat. And, maybe we'll end here because it sounds like someone's a very good boy and needs to go out. But when you're thinking about virtual visits, like, hey, I'm ready to get started. This was great. I'm ready to log off and go check out a virtual visit at Holy Cross. Walk me through it, Tom. What do I do next?
I typically will just consult with the old Google machine and type in, college XYZ admissions, and check out their admission page. Holy Cross just has a site on our admission site, which is just about visits, virtual visits, and on-campus visits when they come back. But we definitely, I think every college will have you pre-register for events. There might be some that you can kind of just pop into or sign up for last minute, but typically in order to get a Zoom link for a virtual visit, you'll have to actually pre-register and sign up for that. Because we don't want just anyone to be able to wander in and to have that link. So I would say you'll have to put a little bit of effort and foresight into it, but it should be pretty easy from there.
And once you put that little bit of information in, now you're on the list to know when they open up for for in-person tours and everything.
There we go. 2 birds, 1 stone.
Absolutely. Tom McHugh from Holy Cross, thank you so much for joining us for our virtual counselor coffee. Thanks to all the parents who are on right now. Before the call, Tom and I were talking about the fact that sometimes with these virtual events, you sign up for them, you check out the webinar later. So everyone watching us on demand, welcome. You're in our hearts too. But this was very helpful. And as we get started, keep, as a parent, log into SCORE, have your son log into SCORE. We're going to get through the scheduling push in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll really start sitting down and having those college planning meetings. So thank you, everyone. We're going to have another counselor coffee on Tuesday. That's going to be about testing. So we'll have that on This Week on Baker Street. I think it was in the mailing that went out. Oh, and hey, Tom, look at that. We got an email address in the box.
I just figured I would send that along in case there's questions that people had that they didn't feel like sharing with the group. So feel free to reach out, Holy Cross related or not. Happy to chat and work through anything moving forward. So great catching up, Jack. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.